Just a little Noah Road reminder. Stay stocked up. Get a little money, especially if you're homeless. Invest in a stockpile of food. And try to stay in areas that don't have very many homeless people in it. Live in the rural communities. Take note of your health, your eating habits. This, of course, is not good food. This is emergency food, food bank food. When you run out of money, this is what will sustain you. So this is not what I would call healthy, but this is food bank, food stash food. You see? I also think, you can only prepare so much, for the SHTF scenarios and the changes that are, clearly on their way. We're kind of in limbo here, and we're all waiting for the next shoe to drop. And it's really difficult to pinpoint where it's going to come from. Is it going to be another pandemic? Is it going to be health passports? Is it going to be perhaps an invasion of foreign people, just flooding into everywhere, and the people who are native to this country are going to be just lost in the mix? Is it going to be an economic collapse? We don't really know how it's going to play out, but it's pretty clear that something, really desperate is going on. If you're in an area that has too many homeless people in it, you might want to seriously think about relocating if it's possible. Another thing, is huge and much room as the West Coast has. I personally wouldn't want to be in the West Coast, even in Oregon and Washington, when the SHTF happens. There is just way too many people out there that have this survivalist idea. Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Montana, and all of these people want to go off and be sort of like militant, resistant, government resistors and survivors and so on and so forth. There's so many of those people out there. And there's just no real territory anymore. There's drug addicts out there that are making, manufacturing, methamphetamines and so on and so forth in places in Washington. You can't get away from it out there. Now, where I'm at, there's just none of that stuff happening. There's no FBI agents, running around, and there's no meth labs out here. Nothing that I've ever seen, no trace of it. There's no homeless people out, technically homeless, sure. What does that mean? Somebody's in between apartments and they're crashing on couches. Occasionally there's a person that sleeps out for a night or two or a week or two, but they're like a local. They know people, they grew up in these little towns and stuff. The places that I go to, there just isn't any real heavy homeless presence. And there is a reason that I don't go to those places where there's a heavy homeless presence. So if I need a few bucks and I need to put on a sign and, do a little panhandling or something like that, I'm doing something that nobody around here has ever done before. I'm out in these woods right now, and if there was lots of homeless people in this town, guess what? My little food supply here would not be safe. Somebody would find it. My little campsite where I have, my tent set up and everything, it would be gone. It'd be ripped up. It would be, vandalized. I couldn't go from one place to another without being bothered by, or my life would be in some way degraded by the pile of homeless people who do not share my ethics. I would be, degraded by a mountain of homeless people if I was in, let's say, a place that had a heavy homeless presence. So you got to stay out of those places if you're going to have any way to prepare. And there's only so much prep we can do in and of ourselves. I mean, what am I going to do? Stock up 10 years of food supply and have some sort of a house, dug into a side of a cliff and just happen to have nobody find it, I mean, am I going to live in a tent? Am I going to be able to carry a rifle or something and shoot game and clean it out in the woods without any refrigeration? I mean, come on, man. You can't really survive all that well if all of this SHTF is nothing but nature taking its course, and it's some form of social Darwinism, and it's nothing divine. So at best I'll be able to survive a couple of months, up in the hills, and skirting around society and living off of the scraps that it leaves behind, if you will, scrounging and hiding and so forth, if there was ever an SHTF scenario. So I'm very well aware that, the means of survival are pretty limited, our preparation for, such a scenario is rather limited in scope. A lot of it outside of a few weeks tops, a couple of months maybe, outside of that is really beyond our control. And all of these people that invest tens of thousands and stuff in these bug outs, whatever it is on their property or in some sort of an RV that can travel, and all of these guns and ammo and all this stuff they're stockpiling is just a huge waste of money, because you're not going to be able to fire a gun without it being heard, and you might be able to pull it off a time or two, where you shoot a squirrel maybe, and I mean, how long is that going to feed you? You keep firing your gun, and you got to keep that gun clean, you got to keep that sucker oiled, it'll rust even in the summer. It's just awful, let alone the winter. You got to change your socks, you got to wash your socks. How are you going to do all that stuff? You at best got a couple of months of scrounging around. If society completely collapsed and the economy completely collapsed to where there was really pandemonium everywhere, and people were locked down, and there was like military involved in, keeping things very, very locked down, the SHTF, just before a post-apocalypse event, there's no way to really survive too long. So, a few weeks is really about all you can prepare for. And one of the things you can do to prepare is to take note of, where you're at. I mean, where do I live? In some places, man, I just would not want to be if the SHTF happened. I wouldn't want to be in the West Coast, and I definitely wouldn't want to be in any areas that had too many homeless people already there. I would want to be in a place where people were a little bit on the mellow side. I wouldn't want to be, for instance, in the Ozark Mountains, where there's a bunch of people manufacturing crank, and there's a bunch of psychos running around those mountains. They really are. It's a dangerous area. I've hitchhiked through, the Ozarks of Missouri, and I've hitchhiked through the Ozarks of Arkansas, and I've lived homeless in those areas, not just once. It's not my first rodeo when I was in, I've been all over the place, and I've really been through the thick of the Ozarks. And I'm telling you, those places, that's a seriously dangerous area to be in. You can disappear quick. That's nowadays in the best of times, let alone in the SHTF times. I wouldn't want to be in places like Missouri, Arkansas. I'd rather be in Arkansas than Missouri, though. You got eastern Oklahoma is pretty, lots of woodiness, and it's really beautiful landscape. But it's full of nutcases. The cops are so horrible. They're already like military there. North Carolina, lots of forest, everything to live in. Again, you got all these military people that are up there in those mountains, and it's like Coeur d'Alene, Idaho and stuff. It's the place where I'm at. You got to go into the in-between places, the places that kind of fall through the cracks, and it's got to be out east. It really does. And you got to have enough mountains to have, good spring water. But after, outside of a couple of months, really, it's way out of your control. There is no way that you're going to be able to prepare for 2 or 3 years, or 6 months even, and you're not going to be able to hunt game and, clean it and out in the wild and shooting guns and stocking up on all that ammo that you're going to need to carry around with you, man. The only thing you're going to be able to do is scrounge and live hand to mouth outside of this kind of preparation right here, You can prepare maybe a couple of months of food. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Spread it around a little bit, and take note of what survives the freezing process and doesn't. Like this kind of stuff, it just doesn't survive the freezing process. This is really good in the summer and fall and spring, but if it freezes like a block of ice and then it thaws, it's really nasty. This does. I have had, for instance, I'll show you last year. I'm trying not to, this is food that I had last year. This, I can grab that and eat that, but this, I wouldn't eat that. It's pretty nasty. So that's last year's food stash because it went through the freezing process. But yeah, these little things work. The ravioli is great for the summer, but if it freezes, it's not good. So you got to take note of that stuff. Peanut butter is great. Powders are great. Oatmeals are good. And meats are usually good. Those 5-gallon buckets, I'm telling you, you put them in the ground and you can. Anyways, I'm just mulling this stuff over, and we could only prepare for a month or two, and really, and outside of that, if you don't have God, if this turns out to just be social Darwinism or sort of like natural selection, and it's just, the old ways are just dying out, and all of the, the Joe Schmoes are just going to be gone. The lower working class of people are just going to kind of be phased out, and we're going to see like a whole new world, and a lot of us aren't going to make it. We're not going to survive the natural selection. If that's all it is, and it isn't divine, and it isn't, we're not going to have that last minute divine rescue, like the Mashiach is going to appear on the scene. We're going to have some sort of an amazing redemption. Well, then we're not going to survive long. So we got to hope in God, and that's the only thing that we really down deep have, is something divine, is a hope for the divine. Hope that we are actually created by a creator that continually manages everything. And if we glue ourselves to that, and if it totally happens, and we work on our ethics, we work on our prayer life, we work on our hearts and our minds, and we guard it, we guard that potential to reach those higher levels, in God, with God. And I'm not going to go, I have my own particular religious bias, which is, I am convinced I'm on the closest to the right path. It's certainly the right path for me, because it's produced results, and it does have some, anyways. But, if you can glue yourself to any path that's sensible, maybe you'll catch more and more glimpses of the truth as you, progress down that path. But that's our only hope. We could survive or prepare for survival for a few weeks or a couple of months maybe. And outside of that, it's God, and only God's going to take care of us. And we're not going to be able to handle, too much time if it's just a matter of natural selection and the collapse of society. And let's just hope that's not the case for the good folks in us. So let's just hope that there is a real, divine plan and a final conflict between the evil and the good that will ultimately redeem the earth. With that said, stay prepared, but don't put too much stock in the little bit of preparation that is in our control, because most of it's beyond our limits.